Dustin Thomas says,
Hey, Dustin.
Dustin, I answered you.
Yeah, Dustin, we're going to bring it up at the Monday meeting and get you a date. We have a big staff meeting on Monday, and that's when we address anything that comes up during the week. But the good news is the masterminds have been awesome. The club nights, we started like about a year ago, and they took off like crazy. And, you know, everyone's masterminds are just awesome. I mean, there's not a night that the gang of us get prouder, frankly, than when we're watching those things because, you know, it's stuff people do when you're not around that demonstrates a lot of what they've been up to. And it just makes us real proud. We care about magic a lot. We try and keep it light, but we've spent our whole lives working on magic and caring about it. And when we get to be in a club filled with members that feel the same way, it really makes us all teary inside.
Hey, Christopher Harrop is here. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Chris, how's things going over there in your country, man? We hear that you guys had a trickier and even worse, trickier time than we did. Are you healthy and safe?
Well,
Rifkin's here as well. The gang's all here. I wonder if they're going to ask questions that throw us off our pedestrian life story and force us into the meat of the now.
Well, at least we can talk about Passover last night a little bit. We did a Passover that was like a week late due to everyone's schedule on Zoom.
Does everyone know what a Passover is? I wonder. That's always the first question. Ha ha ha. What is the Passover? Well, okay. The Last Supper was a Passover meal, right? Yeah. And it was the meal that commemorated the last night the Jewish people were in Egypt before they were delivered in what is commonly called the Book of Exodus in the Old Testament, which apparently a lot of our Christian brethren don't spend a lot of time focusing on the Old Testament, and why should they? It's long on brimstone and fire and short on love and forgiveness.
Yeah, Passover deals more with green clouds of death and things like that. But
it's the best plague holiday. It's the only holiday which features plagues prominently in it. There are 10 plagues in that holiday. And me and my girl were having a rare visit the other night, and we had a choice. We thought about watching Contagion. We thought about watching Outbreak. Then we decided that the 10 Commandments was a plague movie that was probably going to be less overtly realistic. Half Passover.
Chris says looks like they're locked down for another 3 weeks from what he says.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I was just going to say it was really nice to actually get together. I was actually, when I was in it, it was much better than when I was looking forward to it, I guess. And you opened with a magic trick. You did a trick for us, and it was love cards, which I've seen like 3 or 4 times this week. In various segments. Joe Babcock, who's joining us now, did it once for me, and I've seen Rolando do it. And last night I saw you do it, Aaron. It worked out great.
And Ethan, you got to see the problems that I talk about with the love cards, because, look, I've seen Penn and Teller do the trick on stage. I've seen a lot of members do it. I've seen Rolando do it. I spent a month after Rolando's session working on it with my Sunday group because I read in the introduction to Juan's Verbal Magic how difficult verbal magic is. And it really explained the block I had because I had been unable to make any progress with the trick until that point. And I really began to understand that it's hard. It takes your undivided attention to work it out. And there's a couple reasons why. For my money, I've never seen it said anywhere in print that it's designed to work with 6 cards. And when I mapped it out with 6 cards, I couldn't get any positive results. So for me, I personally think it's meant to be done with 4 cards. And when I stopped shenanigating around and began reading the instructions as they appear in Woody's book, word for word, which I did last night, Ethan. Did you notice we had our little prayer books out and we said, let's start with a love ritual. And I opened up the book covered its back like it was a prayer book. And I literally read Woody's words line for line, right?
I even think you read some stage directions.
Which are largely in there.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, and my mother couldn't rip the 4 cards, so she just took them one at a time and ripped them. And so she blew the whole thing at that point. And so and she didn't wait for me to help. I was going to help, but I was busy trying to read the paragraph. I think that trick works so much better when you just read the instructions. You have to, especially with the verbal magic, because it's almost impossible to carry everyone along with you without going in the precise order that's said, exactly what's said. And because a big part of those tricks is that there are a lot of free things you can do. And then there are a lot of times when you can't do free things. And it's very important that you hold to the directions, because the audience will make it mistakenly do a free thing when you can't, when you're just doing a free recap. With all this shuffling, with all this cutting, with all this mixing, well, if you're not careful, if you're not really careful, they'll still continue to shuffle and cut and mix because you've led them to believe that it's okay now. And so it's important that you go line by line and step by step. And so more than any other tricks I've ever seen, the tricks in verbal magic and love cards, which is built on the same principle, really require you to say the words line by line over and over and over again in order to get good results. And there's so much to learn from it. I mean, I think that trick, there's several tricks actually I've learned. I did one on our favorite tricks the other week. We almost did that one last night because, you know, the word magic, which is you needed for the first oil and water in there. First of all, there's 10 cards, there's 10 plagues, right?
Right.
The magic word love, where you say that there's 5 letters for what one, he says 4. He says magic. Spell M-A-G-I-C. How many letters is that? 5. How many face down cards do you each have? 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, right? And they're all black, so you've got to separate the Red Sea. You get to separate us from that, and all the beautiful stuff. So the point is, all these tricks work in every situation, right? But I vote for Joe and everybody else that your best road to success with the trick is to read the instructions out of the book line by line, and see if you don't like the results better. Yeah,
I enjoyed Randy Towers when he did his at the summit.
I think that's a good example of a guy that got it that way.
We have a question.
Yeah,
from Warren Zamfir. Do you consider a lot of Donnie Ortiz verbal magics?
I personally have not yet gotten into Danny's magic. I'm sort of, I've always been a bit of a old soul. I tend to be really obsessed with working on wands concepts and making them my own, which I'm finding to be a multi-year process. And I think Danny's stuff is wonderful, and I'm sure that there will come a time when I want to dive into it. But for me, there's something that keeps coming up when I work on this kind of material, as a Spanish material, which is that, you don't
speak Spanish.
I speak it enough to get by when I'm in Spain or in Mexico or something. But the issue is that I'm an American grounded card magic. If there's schools of magic, my card magic comes from California, from Vernon, from Skinner, from Larry Jennings, from Johnny Thompson, from great masters. And so it's always going to have a drivetrain from a certain kind of car, from a Mustang. You know what I mean? I can stick it inside a Ferrari, but it's a Mustang, And so what I do is I use my Mustang, and then I take pieces from Spain, concepts and a lot of concepts, a lot of misdirection concepts, a lot of presentational concepts, a lot of elements of it. But as you get into the post-Tamariz material, to me, it gets a little bit further away from the stuff that makes me feel the most comfortable and magical, right? And it gets into this sort of even more and more verbal magic and more focused on methods which get meta to me. There's no better way of describing it. So to me, I'm still fascinated by wands magic and bringing that into my own heart. You know what I mean? I don't know. I can show you a trick right now that does exactly that. Okay. This is an example of a trick I've been playing with. Am I allowed to do a trick, Ethan? Quickie?
Yeah, I don't know about car metaphors anymore, but you can do a trick.
Well, the card metaphor only works for people who are grounded in some kind of magic already, you know? And
Okay.
so the point is like I've built my repertoire many years ago and now I add to it.
Right.
So the car metaphor just means that I a lot of my structural core is already set, you know? I do a certain kind of American methodology. And I'm always looking to make it stronger. But when you start to get into post-Tamarice students, you're getting into a whole wild world that's all their own. And that clicking on that link has not, as of yet, gripped my imagination personally. I'll tell you, though, the verbal magic is the most recent offshoot of it. You know, love cards is the first non-wand trick of that school for me to really embrace. So, you know, it's not like it can't or won't happen. Yes?
Just really quick, can you said West Coast. Is there a couple examples of people, of names we would know of East Coast methodology?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think here's how it really works out and I used to talk about this all the time. This is all rather antiquated. This is all rather old stuff. But the East Coast style, as we would refer to it, really meant the East Coast after Vernon left. In the same way the Republicans, and this is not about politics, in the same way that the Lincoln developed the Republican Party, and then in the years that followed, it sort of switched roles with the Democratic Party,
right,
to find our modern roles. Well, the California school was really just the New York school, but then the Magic Castle opened. And in the 60s, Vernon moved out to California. And everyone who wanted to hang with Vernon for that next 20, 30 years of his life, Servan, Jennings, Tom Soney, Earl Nelson, all the California guys, Carney, right? All those guys. Even Amar was there for a time. Ricky Jay, all those guys.
Okay.
Went to California. And then what sort of took root on the East Coast was something else, which wasn't so affected by Vernon and the concept of naturalness. And it became a much more of an overt finger-flinging school. And this is where you end up with the magic of Derek Dingle coming to preeminence and Richard Kaufman coming of age and starting to write about what was happening in New York with Jeff Latta and Derek Dingle and Ortiz at that period, and David Roth at that period. And so all the magic of that time period and the kind of double lifts that you see, a lot of stud double lifts, a lot of snapping on double lifts, a lot of riffles when you did passes, all this kind of stuff, fast passes, you know, all that kind of stuff really is what I mean when I talk about the New York East Coast school, because the classical mystery-oriented sleight of hand, this sort of strict Erdnasian idea in magic, that sleight of hand should never be perceived at all by the audience, that we don't really want to appear to be terribly skillful. We don't want that people to see us do a trick we practiced for 20 years, only go, wow, you're pretty fast with those cards. That spirit of that idea moved to California. Okay. Now, when Vernon died around 1996 or 7, the sort of spiritual center of magic moved to Madrid. And that's when the professor, for all intents and purposes, the role became Tamarice, and people who wanted to really get to that next level of what magic was possible started to find him. And of course, I was having a conversation with Bill Kalush probably in the year 2008 or 7 in New York City. And he said to me, I needed to go to Spain. And it might have been 2002 that happened. And then 2003, I went to FISM to meet Juan. And then 2004, I went to Escorial to start to visit with him a little bit. And I made that pilgrimage to be affected by the work of the master personally. And it was incredibly impactful. So I really do believe the things I'm saying. And there's one other thing that really has got to be mentioned. When I turned pro in the 2000s, I spent an awful lot of time with guys like Eric Mead and John Stetson, and I looked up to them as my big brothers. And they really are where my performance ethos comes from. Was doing, magic, hanging out with Eric at the Tower Bar and listening to a lot of improvisational music, live music, and really being a big fan of the live experience. Even you and I together came up both obsessed with music, right? We were both taught about music growing up. We were both taught about musical theater and British invasion rock and roll. And I went headlong into the Beatles and then the Stones, and you went the whole different direction, right? You went for the Who.
Totally different direction in the exact same era of exact same music. Totally different. No.
Yeah, but it was different, I mean, I think the Who is a really distinct and different thing, and it never even occurred. I mean, you and I both heard Tommy.
Yeah.
And Quadrophenia together, essentially. And I was sort of fascinated by the Stones and the Beatles, and you saw something completely different and that captured you in the Who. And there's probably some relics of it right behind you on the table right now.
Life-changing, actually.
Did we actually answer that question?
Well, the one was his, the other one was mine, and we have new questions, but did you want to show something?
Yeah, I mean, this is just an example of a trick I've been working on, and as you can see, it sort of applies a couple different principles, but it still has an American drivetrain. So ye old sandwich trick. Who doesn't love a sandwich trick? Would someone name a card?
A 3 of clubs?
Really?
Yeah.
Classy decision. I'm going to take the jokers, and I want to make sure everyone can see.
Yeah.
And take the jokers and we'll stick them in the middle of the deck. Like so. Now here's the thing. I want to make sure everyone can see this. Down the top, down the bottom. I'm going to snap my fingers and do what's called a sandwich trick. You've just named a card. I'm going to snap my fingers and the jokers are going to surround your card in the deck, trapping your card. Now, because I'm a little bit of a sneak and a magician, the easiest way for me to do that is to have the jokers trap all the cards in the deck, each and every one. Good response, Ethan?
How did you do that?
Now, obviously, people aren't going to be that happy. And there's ways to do this when there's people here, but there's clearly ways to do it when people aren't here, too. So if I can have a joker on the top and a joker on the bottom, and I give those cards a little squeeze, that joker leaves the bottom, travels all the way up to the top, and brings with it one card, the card that you named, the 3 of clubs.
Wow. How do I type 1 in this thing here?
That's a version of Roy Walton's Smiling Mule that uses my out-jogged Herman pass. And in fact, a little bit of Tamarice to smooth your way and eliminate some work.
Okay, so I have a couple questions that come in.
Yes, sir.
From Daniel Rifkin. Aaron,
Daniel.
I've been working on the one-handed pop-out. Any chances of an AP to learn the move and apply it to Magic? Putting this again in case you missed it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Daniel, have you seen the DVD? For those of you that don't know, and I'm really sort of working stuff that's, normally one of my little secrets is I practice a thing for a few days before I start to get into it. Because we do so much magic here at CC. So this is the one-hand popover. J.K. Hartman had a move many years ago called the popover. And he did this, and pardon me, I don't do it as well as it looks, but a card pops out of the deck, right? That was the Hartman popover that was so fascinating to us all. Now, right after my very first lesson with Jack Burnman, it was about a day later, I locked myself in my room, Ethan, on Bunchberry Lane, because I had an idea. I saw in my mind that it would be possible if I could get every finger in the right position, I would be able to snap my fingers and have that card pop out of the deck. And I realized, because of some other trick that I was learning at the time, that if I could do the popover with one hand, I could do something else with another hand. So the original trick, for example, the original one-handed popover trick that appeared in print, I was so excited. I was a senior in high school, and Jack Burnman called Richard Kaufman and said, this kid has got something you want to see. So I was invited over to Richard Kaufman's house, and I was practicing this in the car on the way over because I was so nervous. This was going to be my big break, right? And it doesn't even use a break. And the idea is I'm going to give those cards a cut, and you'll never see that the card appears over here. So that was the very first application of the one-handed popover. And as you can see, it's designed as a sleight, not a flourish. The idea is if you're doing something with this hand, they don't see it with this hand. Now, at that time, all the people who saw this were and got into this, read the paper engine and watched my stuff. But later, a few years later, some young guys that are always going to be young guys to me and Lee, I guess, named the Buck Twins, saw the one-handed popover. And when they were busy following their passion and essentially creating the magic that we today refer to as cardistry, the Buck Twins changed the move, like so many people. They changed the move and did it so that you would actually see it happen. And I think they may have changed the grip and everything, but the important thing is you actually, or did it with different fingers, but the important thing was to watch the card crawl up over the other side of the deck. So it started to fit into their sequences. So a lot of people learned the one-hand popover from, I guess it was the system, Dan and Dave's sort of groundbreaking thing. And for several years, I think people forgot that this was designed to be this is designed to be done with misdirection. Even if you were going to do a production, right? Even if you're going to do a production, snap your fingers, that production would happen on an off beat. And the card's not there, huh? It's there, at the bare minimum. And so I had Wayne Houchin do a DVD on it with me, and it's about an hour long, and it teaches 5 of my favorite effects with it. Although primarily it's the production, right? It's when you get to that third ace and you don't know what to do, pop over. I mean, that's really what I think it's best for. Even though on that tape, there's a lot of interesting ideas and variations. I used to do a thing where I would take a pocket square out of my breast pocket, and I would show the pocket square on both sides, drape it on my hand, and use that to an effect of reverse, for example. It's all kinds of silly stuff like that. But that's part of the fun of card magic, is when you have a new idea, you really want to see, just like they do in a chemistry lab, you want to find all the ways it can be applied,
I have a sealed one in my basement, I think. A copy of that.
Yeah, in fact, we have a bunch of sealed copies of that.
Okay.
Daniel, have you ever seen the one-hand popover?
He said he has not. He said, I paused and paused your demo for hours.
Ah, yeah, there's an hour-long training on it, which, would be fun to have up and fun when we see you all. Next time I see you all at the summit, there may be a popover DVD in your bag.
I'll write down Rifkin's name for that for later. And
it would be a situation where the best thing to do would be to chop up the DVD into pieces for the amazement plan, because, the 3 paper engine DVDs, which are Popover, Helter Skelter, Revolution, and Search and Destroy in the Nowhere Pass, are basically everything except the half pass. Not everything, but it's the most important stuff in the book. And it's like, it's 90 minutes on Search and Destroy in the Nowhere Pass, and then the next 2 are like an hour each. So it's, 3.5, 4 hours of training.
I have a question from it. Are there Slight albums still around, or are they gone?
I see one every now and again. Most of the tricks in it appear in the paper engine.
Okay.
So the popover first appears in there. I think Search and Destroy does. There's a couple bubblegum tricks maybe that don't appear anywhere else.
Sexy Sadie Sandwich?
Yeah, but that's the illusion control. Now that's one that I haven't done in a long time because I sort of feel like it's one of those, sometimes it's okay to print kind of experimental ideas.
Right.
It was always designed. A lot of what I do is based on depth illusions, right? So if I'm pushing that card in, it was designed to get a frontal tilt. Victor had a frontal tilt. Edward Victor of the depth illusion fame had a frontal tilt. He was doing magic like this, and he would riffle down and stick that card in the pack, right? And so that's like an Edward Victor frontal tilt.
Okay.
And I don't know if I'm showing this to everyone so they could see. I hope so. But you can have that card up like this, and you can even pretend to riffle and stick it in. And this is what it looks like from the front. It's pretty solid, right? And you can even have that go straight across if you're interested in the perfection of it. You can be there and you can do all the subtleties, right? And if you think about it, that's really great, right? But at that age, I didn't think that would be as great as being able to do the magic right down here. So I came up with this wild version of the depth illusion, which was designed. It works best as you're going to the table, and I don't have a table here set up, but as I'm placing this here, I continue forward in a modified bluff grip and push that card forward till it clears the bottom packet, and then keep that bend. You see how it looks a little bit like Daryl's ambitious card gaff with the rope, but you're actually holding it manually in your hands, right? Because you're there, and they get to see that. And so that gets pushed in the center, but it's really going right into that. So that's the illusion control with the sexy Sadie sandwich. You don't see me do it much anymore because, well, frankly, I think I have better methods.
We should highlight that those lecture notes on a slate night of some kind.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like I always think of the illusion control now as one of the babies that, how the Who probably, my favorite bands, they have a lot of songs that they play.
Mm.
Sometimes there's a song that they haven't played for 10 years.
Yeah.
And the fans love it and the fans miss it.
Sure.
But upon reflection, the reason they haven't played it for many years is because they just don't like it that much.
Yeah.
That's mostly what it is. It's mostly not that they're trying to hide it from you. Sure, every now and again, there's a Rosalita, and it becomes a fun game to play. When will they play it again?
Right.
But by and large, if they don't play it, it's because they don't want to play it.
Yeah, the Who's is called Slip Kid. Yeah.
Really? I love that song.
I love it too.
That's a hit, though.
It's not, well, it could be.
It's a wonderful hit. I love that these questions are happening, though. I hope I'm answering them okay.
There is another one.
Yeah.
Warren again, Zamfir. Do you like spectators handling your deck? I know several magicians that don't because it can ruin the feel of a broken deck that fits their hands. I'm that way at times. A broken deck, you feel more confident with some heavy invisible sleights. I like all moves to look invisible and hands apart the old hot plate. Not sure.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. I mean, Vernon used to say that when you do a move or a shift, and basically I have this theory that all moves are shifts. The idea is that no matter what the move is, right, that the moment the hands come together is the moment when you do it. And the idea is simple. If I bring my hands to the deck, your eyes follow to the deck. And by the moment your eyes get there is one moment, it's got to be long over. Whatever it is, it's got to be long over. So that idea, that hot plate idea makes a lot of sense to me, because if I'm bringing my hand down and I look up, by the time you look down, it's got to be over. If I come down and wait and then do it, I've missed my moment. And that's sort of one of the core fundamental ideas that drive all successful sleight of hand. And I don't think that's a school-based thing. I think people have either learned how to do it or they haven't. So I totally agree on that front. However, my time with John Stetson and Eric Mead taught me irrefutably, that when you're doing magic for the people, doing magic for the people is what's important. And Tamarice taught me, and he taught me, look, many people had told me this before, but Tamarice taught it to me in a way where it affected my life, where whenever there's people there, if you can get the cards in their hands, and if you can create the effect that really happens in their hands, it makes things so much stronger. So as a practical matter, by the time I pull out a deck of cards in front of an audience, I've kissed it goodbye in terms of how it makes me feel in their hands, right? It's not about me anymore. So sometimes in a show, I'll crack open a freshie because it's part of the theatricality of the show. But unless that's happening, I actually play with my cards when they're new for fun. Then I toss them in the bag, and what's in the bag is going to get used at showtime, because I'm not gonna plan to. The beautiful thing about being a real card person, as they used to say, a card man, is that you can do your sleights to some degree and in some form in your tricks with any deck that you're handed. And that's always been what excited me about it as a little boy. And as a grown-up, I really rejoice in that. So I want to give the people the cards. I want to let the people shuffle the cards. I want to let the people do what needs to be done. And this is another thing, what I'm saying about taking a lot from the Spanish without altering the structural methodology of what I'm doing. So I'm still using perhaps an American method, but then all the psychology and the presentational structure of it all is all coming from as close to Juan as I can get it, because I want it happening in the most impactful way possible in the audience's hands. Now, in the old days, as a younger guy with less resources, I would typically go out and do 2 hours of walk around and use one deck. And I would have cards signed, and I would lose cards, and I would almost picture like the cards were with me on an island. So every time a card was destroyed in the trick, I would just lose the card. So I would contrive to have someone pick a 2 or a 3 and sign it. If they were going to end up keeping it, it was going to end up fold, ripped, and appearing somewhere, at the end of the trick. And then I would be so basically like being on the island, we would chop off one toe at a time, least important toe first, because I'd be walking out of there with 30 cards on 2 bloody stumps.
So,
right?
So you would hit the last group of the night or whatever, and your deck might be 31 cards or something.
That's right. But the tricks I would be doing wouldn't matter.
Okay.
So and I would avoid having the aces and the face cards tampered with until the last possible minute. And I might shift to tricks. I might only burn through 12 cards. And I might say, look, I don't even have a full deck anymore, but I could still do all my ace routines and all my ace and king routines, and I could still do panic and all that stuff. And now these days, if I'm working walk around, which doesn't happen often because I like to have a space to work and to have people have the attention time to see me. But these days in a show like that, I will, in all likelihood, do 2 or 3 sets where a card or 2 won't be missing, and then toss it and grab a fresh one, because if you're a professional card trick person and that's all they bring you to do, you can afford to trade out your guitar after 2 or 3 songs.
Since in the short time I've been gobbling up decks here and there, I probably now have 15 decks of open full decks, because I like to open new ones.
I got to tell everyone about you last night. We were doing the love cards, and of course, Ethan and I were having our family. We were foisting a new tradition on them, which was to put a little magic at the beginning of the show. And my feeling is we'll do a little verbal magic in our family at the front of every one of these family get-togethers, because everyone can do it, and the cards are in their hand, and it really does have an impossible effect. But when I saw Ethan start to rip, and I say, grab some cards you can rip, and I saw Ethan go to rip some aquamarine Jerry's Nuggets, being in the generation and time when Lee and I bought those cards for $1 and held on to them for dear life, because even though they were $1, we were in college. Watching Ethan just rip through some Jerry's Nuggets was one of those time warp moments.
Well, okay, so I'm not saying it happened here. I'm not saying it happened in the factory. That deck, I don't know if I've ever seen a Queen of Hearts in that one. That's why I picked it. That's why I picked that deck.
What do you mean? Oh, you're saying that there's a missing card.
There's a missing card in the deck. That's why I picked it.
It's unlikely that it vanished in the factory.
It's unlikely it vanished in the factory.
And I promise that the last time I was at your house, I did not do things like steal the Queen of Hearts out of your deck and leave with it.
It would be weird if every deck had a Queen of Hearts missing.
It would be, and then you'd have to be blaming me at that point.
Yeah.
And then I would have had to be doing some shenanigans.
What did Harrop said? No. He also asked, when practicing, do you prefer to practice a move on its own or part of a trick or both? I would like to answer that question for you.
I would love to hear your perspective. You see me practice, of course, situations when I'm practicing around other people.
I don't know how it is now, but growing up, it is, I guess, from 13 on, maybe longer. The man still doesn't go anywhere without something in his hands, whether it was coins for a while or mostly cards. Movie theaters, under the table at Thanksgivings, Passovers.
There was about 7 years off, though. There's about 7 years off when I was leaving Los Angeles that I didn't have cards in my hand every day.
Right.
Maybe
And so it was, I would always assume it would be one move over and over again, and every once in a while there would be a changeover on that move, and then a little while later we would see something involving the sleights and the moves that had been practiced every day for hours. Did you constantly have cards like at school?
Oh, totally. Oh, totally. Like my first when Magic kicked in, I was in sophomore year of math class. And one of our members, John Forrest, was my algebra teacher. And
one of our members now?
He's been a member for a long time.
Wow. Okay.
And John Forrest did a card trick with what basically was three index cards, because cards aren't allowed in our high school. I had an inner city high school, which was a magnet program. So I was bussed into an inner city high school for theater, and but no cards were allowed at school because the kids would be gambling all the time. And so John Forrest took 3 postcards and he put a happy face on one of them. And he was basically doing a double lift style 3-card Monty routine, like a color Monty type routine. And it was blowing my mind because it was the second. I'd learned one trick. I'd learned the old glide trick with the 4 cards at camp a year or 2 before, and I'd done it. I would do it for people until they understood how it worked. You know, they'd say, do it again. I'd say, all right. And I'd do it again. So that's what it was like for like 2 years. Then John Forrest did that trick for me. And I went, what was that? Let me show you mine. And he went, well, that was called the double lift. And what you just did was called the glide. Now, until that moment, I had no idea that my little card trick had a name. There was a name for that move. And so he said, I got a book for you. And then he brought in the Royal Road to Card Magic. And I went nuts. You know, I went nuts over it. Then later that year, he brought in a new book that had just come out called Sankey Panky. Much earlier in Jay Sankey's career too, right? Much earlier in Jay Sankey's career.
So it's John Forrest's fault. This whole thing.
Yeah, well, so the thing is, I went absolutely nuts, and I started to practice everywhere, and I practiced with and it was actually to a dull roar. I thought I was practicing everywhere, but it really was about 2 hours a day, maybe 3 or 4. But to me, it was a lot.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, practicing, Alexa, stop. Me practicing 3-4 hours a day was a lot. And then later that year, our grandfather, we went to go visit our grandfather, and he had a membership in a beach club in Florida. And he said, we have a magician there named Bill Malone. Now, I never heard of Bill Malone.
I couldn't understand.
Alexa, stop. He had a beach club there in Boca Raton or somewhere there.
Boca?
Yeah, and so I never heard of Bill Malone before. I much less knew that he was one of the 2 or 3 greatest card handling magicians in the universe. I mean, I had not yet, I'd barely heard of Vernon. I hadn't heard of Marlowe. I didn't know Bill Malone was one of the greatest living magicians and one of the most impactful people for me to be seeing. You know, like I'd read The Pass in Royal Road, but I didn't know if that was for real or anything, and I hadn't watched any videos on it. And Bill Malone brought his little table top there, and he said, oh, you're a magician. I'd love to see you do some tricks. First, let me get my stuff, and then I'm going to show you some stuff first, and we'll see what you think. And then he sat down at the table, and he did 30 minutes for me, and the cards started falling out of his mouth. And he was doing all of his table stuff, and the cards are appearing this way and that way, and I take a look at the card, and I boom. And I don't know how I knew he'd just done a pass, but there was nothing to know about except it was what the book had said. If you'd seen Charlie Miller do the pass, you would know that it could be done without anyone having any idea. And I just realized I was looking at the real thing. And then I realized as I was watching it, it's like I'm having my life change in real time. And I'm busy freaking out about the magic, but more importantly, in the much bigger part of my head, right behind the surface, my life priorities were changing. My understanding of what magic could be was changing. My understanding of all of it was wrong. Everything was wrong. I wasn't practicing a lot. I hadn't even started to practice. I was going to have to practice more. I was going to have to change my whole life, and it was all happening to me in the moment. And then Bill gets to the end of his thing, cards falling. I mean, I'm watching these palms. It's all so impeccable. So, I mean, it's still breathtaking to imagine. And he says, so I would love to see you do something. And for the first time in my life,
Shaky.
I shook.
Yeah.
Because I'd met my first great magician.
Right.
And Ethan, it did not go away really for at least 10 years. I didn't start to have that go away because it thus began the process of meeting great magicians and hoping to get lessons from them in one way or another. And that's when it started to creep up to 8 hours a day or 9 hours a day. Then I went to college where the Denny and Lee Magic Shop was. And I met Pete Francis, who was Frank Thompson's one and only student. And that's the realm of real card masters. And that's when it went to 12 to 14 to 15 hours a day. So that's where it was in college, was learning the ordinaries and really sort of embracing that universe. I mean, I didn't have any of that background when
Is that when you were you doing the World of Magic clubs at that point?
That's around the time Mark D'Souza was giving me my very first lecture opportunity.
Right.
Like by the time I was a senior in high school, I had that popover out between Larry Jennings and Martin Gardner in Magic Magazine, and I was hooked. And I saw that Jay Sankey, whoever the hell that was, a coin guy, I didn't care. But he had this beautiful book out by Richard Kaufman, who lived in the area, and I thought, I can. There's time for me to do this and be a young person. And then I moved from Baltimore to Las Vegas and back. And around this time, I had my first lecture notes come out, the Slide album. Mark D'Souza gave me my first opportunity to lecture. Denny gave me my first club lecture at a store. And, then I moved out west from 96 to 98 and did all magic all the time. And that's, of course, when I was really hanging with Johnny Thompson and Earl Nelson and Meade and Stetson.
Is that around the time you met Adam Grace?
No, I didn't meet Adam Grace. I left that time in Las Vegas is when I really started to meet everyone. I remember partying at Jeff McBride's house the first night I got into town. I was Dan Harlan's roommate in college in Las Vegas. And Lee Asher and I would go to Alan Ackerman's office for office hours on campus where you could find all the Marlowe books, And on Saturday mornings, we would meet with Michael Skinner and Bob Kohler and a lot of those old timers and whoever's in town for the Empire. So it would be Amar and Daryl, and the whole cast of characters was coming around. And Pat Alexander and I were hanging out writing parodies with Dan.
Were you working at a magic store too then?
I worked in a magic store. I worked doing magic in the Caesars Casino. I worked at Magic Masters.
Right.
And you probably remember that because they first hired me at the Dave Williamson branch just after he left Magic Masters in high school, which is where a lot of our core training on the things like thumb tips comes from. And I still think that that's the best way to learn those things.
DC at the Harbor Place? Is that what you're talking about?
It was at the shops. It was downtown DC, right across from the Warner Theater.
Right.
And,
Shops at National Place.
Yeah, I remember Derry Galabate coming in, and
it was just a little corner in like the bottom of the hallway. It didn't seem like there was a lot of foot traffic at all, but it was like this carved out really old library, like Magic Masters, carved out library room.
Most of our viewers don't probably remember Magic Masters because since they got into Magic, Ken Fletcher went into bankruptcy and Gino Minari sort of took over with a whole bunch of lower dollar pitch shops. I mean, I think Ken had this groundbreaking idea 10, 15, 20 years before that if you took a nice oak paneled thing, you put a lot of books in it, a lot of display pieces on the wall, and a little secret bookcase, you could have a very fancy pitch shop. And in that pitch shop, you could sell a thumb tip and a booklet and a hanky that would cost about $2 to the store to have. And you could have a man in a tie do the demo and sell it for 30, 45 bucks. Take the person into the back behind the secret bookcase, teach them how to do it, and give them the guarantee you can you can do it before you leave the store or have your money back, right? And of course, everyone felt like they could do it before they left the store. And then, of course, sometimes they would come back an hour later and say that they couldn't do it and they wanted their money back, but the guarantee said clearly before you leave the store. So we give them the lesson. We teach them how to do it, and sell all the classic pitch items, right? Scotch and soda, nickels to dimes.
I knew how to do those.
Coin and bottle, cigarette through coin. All of those methods are still, I think, the best methods.
And the single greatest thing that I ever saw when I was there, and I still want to see more every day.
Rocky.
I want to see Rocky Raccoon.
And Rocky paid the bills for all of us. And when I turned professional, I said, "Hey, David Williamson, I don't know if you remember me, but I worked at the Magic Masters in DC." He said, "I'll tell you this, you're going to be a professional magician. Never lose that raccoon."
Right? Why? Because you're going to need it?
Yeah, because, Dave probably was using that raccoon in the Ringmaster bit when he was in Las Vegas, because that raccoon has paid the bills for years, or at least it had it for 20 years at that point.
Right.
Dave, of course, is one of the titans like Malone. So those guys will always be big kids to me.
Well, I remember we had a stack of videotapes, right? And what I remember is I think there was a David Williamson tape. I know we watched that Penn and Teller PBS special.
That was a bit
ad nauseum.
Was that before I was doing magic, really, right? That was right at the thing.
Was it? Yeah. And what else was there? There was there's a lot of Harry Anderson and Turk Pipkin videos.
Right. I remember obsessing over Harry Anderson stuff at that point too, because these were the guys I liked. We have a member here named Rahan Jackson, who is a Washington, D.C. area magician who may be a couple years younger than me, but he was coming up at the exact same time I was in Washington, D.C. at the Magic Masters, knocking around. They wouldn't let me around there until I got a job. Like, they used to shoo you away if you were a kid interested in magic. Owl's Magic Shop was the real magic shop,
Right. Yeah, this was
so Rahan, welcome. Everybody say hi to Rahan. He's a pro in DC. I'm so glad that he's here in the club. Really. So good to see you, Rahan.
Magic Masters was definitely almost like a sharper image vibe.
Yeah, it was fancy.
It was fancy. Like the outside was fancy and it just looked like, they had to pay for, that shop space in that particular spot.
Well, if you think about it, Al's was a traditional magician's magic shop. You would walk in, there'd be gags in the front, jokes and novelties, and you go in the back, there'd be the counter and all the stuff. And then there'd be the big props and the books in the back.
Yeah. And
the thumb tip cost, $3, and the silk cost like $2, and the book of 50 tricks was, not necessary. And when, as a kid, when I first went into Al's Magic Shop and I realized that Magic Masters had, wanted $40 for what was $6 worth of magic, I was offended, But of course, I was such a pest. Neither of those shops wanted me around until our friend Jason Craw left his job at the Magic Masters to go on to graduate school and gave the owner a good word for me. And that's when they flew me down to Atlanta before my senior year of high school.
I remember that.
And it was my first time going away from home by myself without supervision. And I stayed in a business apartment for 2 weeks and learned how to pitch magic for Magic Masters. And this is one of the heaviest days of my life. First day on the showroom, 3 salesmen hanging around. 3 salesmen hanging around watching me. I had the script memorized, but I was terrified of doing the silk vanish, the thumb tip.
Yeah.
And they made me do it 3 times. You know, I got the hanky here, I got the hanky there. It's an illusion. It's blue on this side.
Right.
And clear on the other. Throw it up in the air. It comes back down. We'll try it again. Gone. Right? Like I still do that action, but I'll never forget the fear of doing that. I never would have done it if I didn't have to do it day one at my job, and they just knew making me do it 3 times and messing it up 3 times was going to work it all out. But I was paranoid the night before. I was going to lose my big job if I couldn't do the silk vanish. I have to tell you, it was a straight commission job too. Like I made 19% of a $35 silk vanish, and I only got paid if I sold it.
Clark says he remembers buying the Gaff coin set at Magic Masters in the Underground in Atlanta many years ago.
That's right. And it was exactly across the street. They had one in the Hilton and one in the Marriott. And I was in the Marriott. Yeah.
Okay.
Peachtree Center.
Yeah, I remember those days, and I remember you were nervous about flying out there, and I remember we thought it was the coolest thing ever. I think our parents thought it was the coolest thing ever that you got a job. And,
well, my parents had made me get a job in fast food months before because I was doing magic all the time, and they were like, "Get a job, sir."
Yeah.
So when I got that job, and it was really the worst nightmare of my life, but then this thing came through, and I got a chance to go fly away and be a magic salesman. It was like, I don't know, it was a life-saving situation.
Now, was this before or after your Renaissance Festival sojourn?
The Renaissance Festival was the first thing. That was like when I was 15 or 16. That was right after I started. I just wanted to answer that other question. I practice something. I'm always working on something. But there always comes a point. None of it really matters unless you're doing magic. So the part of it Ethan doesn't get to see very much is when it starts to look like rehearsal. And that's always when it's a lot more like work and a lot less like a fidget. I can work combinations on a pass or something for hours and weeks and weeks and weeks. But ultimately, as it starts to come together, it's really, its intended purposes become more and more important. And so that part I don't do hanging around watching TV with my family or whatever.
Right.
That part ends up looking like a job. And, when we did this Magic Castle show, I did my first Magic Castle appearance for the first time in 10 years. They invited us. They invited me to do the close-up room for the banquet and Adam to do the parlor. I stopped everything and I was rehearsing 8 hours a day, like rehearsing. So that's what
I got to run through.
That's what happens when it's your job, at that time, all the messing around is over,
Yep.
And I don't know how many people want to hear about that, but that's what it requires when you're really going to do it. At CC, we're polishing off and sharing the greatest magic of a lifetime, but we're doing it every week. So none of it is, there's never the time that you would have to actually rehearse the magic that I would actually be doing in my show. It's a lot of tricks I might do if I was working all the time, and I might choose for that process at any time. But, the magic that really goes into the show gets rehearsed in a whole different layer of work. Many layers, frankly,
Well, sometimes I think about the amount of hours that you've put in, and then I multiply that by, 5 by the panel, and how many hours they've put in just practicing and doing what you're talking about right now. And I had Rolando on last week, and he had books and notebooks and notebooks and notebooks upon notebooks of notes. A lot of hours go into it to make it look as, easy as it does, as easy as you guys make it look.
it's kind of weird, right? Because if you do it right, it's almost part of the illusion of magic is that it didn't take any effort. Like either it happens as a surprise, you didn't even know it was going to happen, or it's happening without your help, or at the bare minimum, it wasn't physically difficult to do, right? So since that's the goal, you achieve it only when people think that only an idiot can do it. Because it just happens, you know?
And for years, that's all I thought was happening.
Which is why the temptation is so great to do gambling demonstrations and things that really say to the audience, see how skilled I am?
Right.
But I've always found it to be a tough trade-off because, yeah, they can see how skilled you are, but at the end of the day, it doesn't get you as high an impact as that emotional connection. But you can't get that emotional connection with them focusing on how hard you practice. You know, you have to have one or the other. You have to make a choice.
But I hate to take you back, but I do want to hear about the Renaissance Festival a little bit, just because I was there. I was dropped off sometimes for hours. A lot of these stories you're telling about, I've been the little kid in the corner, just sitting there saying,
why is this happening to me?
Yeah. And
I want my own life. Me and Counselor Troy disagree.
She had empathy for me. But I do want to talk, because there's two guys there. There's a guy named Mike Rose, but there was a guy named Johnny Fox who did sword swallowing.
Johnny Fox was a rock star, you know.
Yeah.
He was a sword swallower and a magic act, and he lived a real unconventional life, and he would travel the tour circuit. And, you know, the Maryland Renaissance Festival was a big Renaissance festival.
Yeah.
Every summer for 8 weeks, he would be encamped there, and I'm guessing what was his super trailer. And he would do these packed 1,000-person shows in a special stage devoted to him. And it was a 20-minute act. It was a 20-minute busking act with some sword swallowing. It's the first time I ever saw someone do a muscle pass, and he made a silver dollar float from here to here. And you could see it 1,000 feet back, and it was just really a great Renaissance fair magic show. And he was so cool. And when, you know, now all of a sudden I've been coming to the Renaissance for years, always called a magic show, but now I'm a magician, you know, and now I got myself a spot in the Young Actors Ensemble. And so that means that when I'm not in my play, which is once or twice a day, I'm roaming the earth, interacting with people and doing magic is my trip.
Right.
And I remember one day having a hard day because I had my cards and it was raining, and Johnny Fox walked by, and I was always picking my things to say to Johnny very carefully so that he would like me, you know. And I said, Johnny, and he walked over and I had my 4 cards. I'd been doing Paul Harris's twist, you know, where the card in the middle turns red, the bizarre twist, you know. It turns face up, it turns face up, it turns red. And my cards were soaked. And I said, I wanted Johnny to know I was like a guy that knew magic, you know.
Right.
So I said, what would Paul Harris do? And he takes the cards and he goes, kid, the question you got to ask is, what would you do? He rolled out. So that was a powerful moment. And Mike Rose was as helpful to me as he knew how to be. And of course, Mike Rose is now the head of the Maryland Magic Society or something like that. I saw him last year, you know, friendly old faces. But those Renaissance Festival days were good days, man.
Yeah.
It's a different thing when you do, there's walk around and then there's walk around for 8 hours, and there's walk around for 8 hours with no soles in your shoes because they're an anachronism.
What cards did you use?
Bicycles.
But they're not an anachronism?
They are, but a fair amount of anachronism was to be expected.
Right.
Yeah, it happened, you know.
You
couldn't order a Riesling in King Henry VIII's court at this time. You know, you couldn't have a Bud Light. It would have to be mead.
there's no forks in medieval times, so there's no forks at medieval times. Would you like a refill on your Pepsi?
I think there it is said.
Yeah.
I wonder, were there any last questions we had today?
Yeah. One more.
It's been fun to go down memory lane with you, Ethan. And I have to tell you on behalf of all of our members, it is so exciting to have you here beginning your own magical journey now at CC. I went over to your house. I saw all these cards lying around. I saw these moves. I found out you'd been absorbing unnutritious tutorials on the internet.
Listen, I just wanted to learn how to do that. I know how to do that. I quit.
That's all it takes.
One more question. Warren says again, I want to have 8 to 10 tricks I can do forever, frontwards and backwards. So hard to pick them. How would I narrow it down?
Oh, you would start by picking one that you know should be one of them and start working on that one. And you should let them arise. The ones that you haven't been able to forget so far because you just know that they've got everything you need, don't make it too precious. In the same way our body turns over its cells every 10 years or 7 years, you know, you're completely constituted of all different stuff. All the skin is different skin than it was 10 years ago, you know. That will tend to happen with your magic. So if you need 8 to 10 now, you probably already know what they are. If not, stop dithering and just settle on the ones that you already know that they are, even if it's 4 or 5. And even if it's only 4 or 5, let it be that 4 or 5. Fill that list with the obvious choices when they appear. And then don't be afraid. The natural process is from time to time, one of them will lose its spot for a while, you know? And that ultimate 10-year or 10 tricks forever process may take 5 to 10 years or longer to solidify into its final form, you know? Took 50 years to build, 50 years or more to build what we now to call Constantinople, but they never even called it that at the time. You know, you have to just get the 10 tricks that you need now, and don't be afraid to have some of them lose their post to other tricks, which you learn later are better, at least better for you, if not better entirely. I'm sorry, but it's that simple and much easier to work that way.
Hey man, thanks for coming on.
Did it work, Ethan? Did we do okay?
I think we did all right.
That's good.
I appreciate it. We're going to try to keep this going next Friday. I haven't asked the next person yet, but I think I know who it's going to be.
Ooh, I'm excited to find out who.
And I just want everyone to do me a favor, vote for the Conjis, please. It's
Yes, Rahan, I remember meeting up at Buffalo Billiards on Mondays. I absolutely do. Sorry, I was just catching to see any
Oh. And Jason's asking about the gig machine, but I'm going to get in touch with him later.
Yes.
Yes.
No, to find the back room and to discover, you know, the new on-demand interface is much improved, and I think it handles most of people's needs most of the time. But then there's the back room, so you can actually go deep digging and finding everything that, not everything, but most things from the past are there waiting for you if you're, it's great because it's like a magic shop, right? There's all the stuff that's there for you that you mostly want most of the time. And then if you want to go digging in the stacks, they're there and they're quite diggable, and there's a lot of good stuff there.
Except your annoying younger brother waiting on the sidewalk asking if he can leave.
Let me ask one more question to the group of the 14 guys here.
Okay.
How many of you guys want to see more in-depth card stuff in the club? You know, because, you know, it started before we became Conjuror Community. I was it was a lot of card stuff all the time. Now we've tried to keep it much more targeted towards what the guys are looking for most of the time. And I'm always trying to figure out how much of that we should spend doing the nitty gritty type card stuff, which I don't know. I feel like we do a better job teaching than most. and but we don't want to do it more than the actual members want. So, and of course, Ethan, this is taken from a sample strictly of the people who are here right now. So
Sure.
So Joe Babcock, take my advice, all right? Take my advice from the beginning and try it, and then drop me an email and let me know how it works. And can I get some ones from Michael Sproul knocking out and being there for these afternoon sessions and jamming? I think it's amazing. I don't know if people are doing the ones, but
I'm answering a couple questions in chat from Baxter and Ren.
if there's a couple more questions, Ethan, we can take them.
They're not for they're technical things.
Okay, so everyone has receded back into the normal drudgery of club life.
Yeah.
Well,
That's okay.
if anyone has the DeLand book, let me just tell you, this morning I was looking through the DeLand book, Mystery and Madness, I think, or Magic and Madness. Well, you know, towards the back of it, there's a letter from him to the Society of American Magicians, quitting the Society of American Magicians, refusing to sell any magic to any members of the Society of American Magicians, and telling them all to go eat his hat. And so you can basically see the end of his whole magic career as he tells the Magic Club that they're all a bunch of terrible people. And of course, it's revealed later that he was losing his mind, but it's just fascinating to see some of the stuff we talk about with Magic Clubs sort of borne out in the history books. You know what I mean? Fascinating book. Learned a lot of good tricks last night. I read the DeLand book last night, Ethan, at 4 a.m.
By Richard Kaufman?
Yeah, it was this big. I went through the whole thing. I mean, I didn't read all of it.
One of our members ordered one this morning.
It's really badass, and you really will learn about a lot. And I learned a trick that I'm going to probably bust in the next 2 weeks for everybody that is real good. Real.
Well, I know people. Maybe I can borrow one somewhere.
Yeah, we can help you.
Chad wants to see a homing card workshop at some point.
Which homing card? Card to pocket or cap style? Because I've never even learned cap style.
And Warren also says, I'd like to see the focus on a magician and a card or coin trick analysis. And don't we have some of that coming up with Danny this week?
I'm not entirely sure what Warren means by that, but I do know that Danny's lecture workshop on next Wednesday is going to be a real highlight. Danny's inspired by Kanoa hard bottle. And so
Card to pocket, Chad says.
And so that's, it's always nice when we respect the teacher of a person who we like the work of. But I have to say that when I see Danny's work, it looks to me so magical. And talking to Danny, he understands how it works. You know, there's a handful of guys that can make magic look like magic. So be it. But even less than that are the guys that can actually really explain to you why it looks like magic in a way where you can make it look like magic too. Danny Goldsmith is one of these few people. So we've been very fortunate that when I call and ask a person like that to come see us, they by and large know me, and they often take it as a compliment, and they often come share with us. So I think we're going to get a really special night. So practice up your coin stuff, because this stuff is going to be really epic. And, he's got a new DVD out, and he put together like many different bonus pieces of video training just for us. So, again, and everyone will be happy to know it's instant delivery, and you'll get it instantly. So all your needs will be fulfilled.
That's good.
Ethan, thank you so much for hosting me. I hope you have me back sometime.
Thank you for having me. Give a kiss to our mother.
Kiss to our mother.
We were so safely keeping with you during this stay-at-home time. And
it's really something, huh? Never thought I'd get a chance to live with my mother this way.
She's sleeping on your couch.
No, she's sleeping in, I gave her my room. I've moved into the studio full time.
You're such a mensch.
Like I've said, like what we did with lately. Yeah, we're going to be doing all kinds of stuff like that, Warren. I think there's room for it in the format, and I think everybody is learning so much. And I think I'm very proud of our members. I don't know if when we'd started this, our members would have been at that moment as educated as they are now, to the point where they realize that what we're essentially having is a graduate class, a college class on great magic. You know, we're taking an example of a great piece of magic, and then we're breaking it down and really getting into it. And like, I have to compliment you, because if you kids were not of a level of sincere interest and passion for this magic, we would be not able to give you things that are really on such a deep level. You know, I think as time goes on, I can feel our members are just getting smarter and smarter and sharper. And, you know, pretty soon we need to get Cobra Kai jerseys for everybody. You guys are going to rock it at the All Valley competition, you know?
We need Miyagi Dojo ones, because Cobra Kai's, they're not the good guys.
They are in now, aren't they?
Well, yeah, I guess they are.
All righty.
All right, Johnny, sweep the leg. Thank you so much for coming. And I'll catch you soon. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it.
Have a great weekend.